This episode is presented by Silversea.
From Kurtco Media. Coming up on the show.
Which is a fantastic city. I mean, not only is it beautiful and diverse, but the food is just explosive.
That's Chef Nancy Silverton. I'm Bruce Wallen, and this is Travel That Matters. Hey everybody, and welcome to Travel That Matters. My guest today is Chef Nancy Silverton, the woman behind Pizzeria Mozza and much, much more. She's going to talk to us about everything from Umbria to Saudi Arabia. So let's get to it with Nancy Silverton. Nancy Silverton, welcome to Travel That Matters. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here. And I didn't have to travel very far to get here, by the way.
We came to you, actually, this time around. And thank you, guests. We are here in L.A., your hometown, my hometown. So I am excited to talk to you a little bit about where we both live and where we're both from. But first, a destination that a lot of Angelinos have gone to over the years, Baja California and Mexico. I read somewhere about kind of this epic family road trip you did when you were younger down into Baja.
Let me just say, that epic trip that you might be talking about is a trip that my father took, I would say, at least 3 times, which doesn't sound like a lot, but the method of getting there was very difficult. So he had a red and white VW bus with the windows that go all the way around, and he would take that bus and drive from Encino, California to La Paz, and he used to say it's the tip of Baja.
Right.
But it was when there was no road, and he used to like to brag that he would only be able to travel at the speed of 5 miles an hour. And I don't remember how many days it took him, but he loved it. I think he did it at least 3 times in his bus and 1 or 2 times with his motorcycle. He also was obsessed with Tijuana, which was a lot closer. And he would go down, and he loved the bullfights. And I'll never forget, I would go down a few times with him, and we would go to highlight games. And I thought those were really fun. And he just loved the streets of Tijuana. But I remember when he took me to the first bullfight, and I didn't really comprehend that a bullfight meant killing a bull. I was so horrified that I spent the entire evening with my head turned away from that fight. But he was a very early, just a fan of, Mexico in general, but that trip to Baja. And later on, he actually bought a plane, a 4-seater plane.
Oh, wow.
And I went to Mexico a few times with him on that plane to Puerto Vallarta and Mazatlan.
Well, you're definitely speaking our language. AJ and I have both lived in Puerto Vallarta over the years, and Baja. I mean, one of the things I love about Baja is that you can still kind of find, what your dad was seemingly after here with the kind of remoteness and the ability to get away. It's still like that.
Well,
I mean, the roads are better. But
the roads
still,
are better. There, you can go much faster than that 5 miles. But what's interesting, because I didn't really understand the geography of Baja, and so when people say, "Where's your restaurant?" I used to say Cabo San Lucas, because that was where, or Cabo, because that's where the airport was. But it's not in Cabo. It's on the Cia Cortez side, and on that side is where it's still the undiscovered, non-touristy side. I think that if you go on that Cabo side, now it's not as remote, let's say. There's a lot of pretty fancy, pretty high-end hotels that dot that coast.
Well, the place that you have a restaurant is also a pretty fancy, Four Seasons hotel. But I do want to talk about that because it is it's probably the same distance from the Cabo airport, but it's a totally different place.
Yeah.
It really is different. Can you just, the East Cape, Costa Palmas is the name.
Right.
Can you just tell us a little bit about that area and what drew you to it?
I'm such a traveler. I mean, I just love to travel. And having a restaurant in different parts of the world is a little bit of work, but a great excuse. So I jumped at that chance. It's not a hole in the wall. It's a Four Seasons run property, and they're now just building an Aman hotel. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but they built a man-made marina, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they're constructing like a marina village around that. It's an expansive property, beautifully, beautifully landscaped.
How is Mozza? What does Mozza look like there compared to in LA? Like, are you drawing from Mexican food and ingredients there, or like do you take a different approach down there than you do here?
So we're not trying to make a Mexican version of mozza. It's still mozza. You'll find all of the classic dishes in actually all three of our restaurants that are on the corner of Highland and Melrose. So there's a little bit of pizzeria, there's a little bit of osteria, and a little bit of kisbaka at the restaurant. But what we are using are local ingredients.
Right.
So the pork is local. The vegetables are local. The fish is local, so we are using local ingredients, but we're not trying to put a Mexican twist on them.
Back to kind of your dad's travels, your early travels, like how did that, I mean, it sounds like you inherited his desire to explore and
Yes.
travel. Like how did those early travels influence kind of the way you traveled later as an adult?
Well, it's funny. I didn't think about it then, but I definitely thought about it as a parent with young kids. And
Yeah.
I realized that my love for travel is because my mother and father made it so easy because they loved it so much, meaning that they eliminated the stress that so many people have with travel, and they rolled with the punches. If they got there and the car wasn't ready, that's okay. If the plane was delayed, things happen. If your purse got stolen, that happens too. It's all part of the adventure. And I think that's key to traveling, is that you can't predict everything. There's going to be things that happen, but it's all part of the experience. And I learned that from my parents, and I think I've given that to my kids. And I think it's a great gift because so many people are afraid of traveling.
Yep.
It's a hassle to them. They're afraid to go places. They don't like the unknown.
Especially with kids.
Yeah.
Especially with kids, right? No,
Yeah.
I that's a great point. And I think that like being able to, preparing enough that you can then embrace the unpredictability when it inevitably happens,
Yep,
right?
and it does.
Yeah, it does happen. What about so what's one of the first trips you took on your own that kind of shaped your whole perspective, like led to who you are?
And I went to London in 1977 to go to the Cordon Bleu. And I went by myself to London, and I lived there for 4 months. I had a routine, which was school, but still, I was in a foreign country. I didn't know anybody, and I had to learn how to get around. These days, I think that teenagers travel on their own a lot earlier than they did at my age. I think I was 20-something, right? When I was 13, I went with my friend Margie to Israel on a teen tour. Mm-hmm. But then nothing, and then London. Then I went back with my sister and a friend and kind of did the Paris, parts of Italy, and Greece, and gone for 3 months. Followed by that, back to France to school, and then now got back 2 days ago from a week in Italy. I was there for a Women in Food conference.
That sounds like a good conference.
Oh, it was
Women
a
in Food
great
conference in Italy.
And I have a little house in Umbria.
Okay.
So I have a destination there too. So I got to spend 4 days at my house, 3 days at this conference, and then I'm leaving in 3 days. I'm going to London because I have a restaurant in London for 6 days, and then I'm going to Spain to travel with an importing company, and then I'm going to France for only 3 days. But one of those days is cooking at the Palace of Versailles, which someone has, no one's cooked there for hundreds of years, I don't know how long, to cook for 10 people that bought an experience that includes having me cook for them at the Palace of Versailles.
How did this come about? Was this a charity auction type
No,
of
it
thing?
wasn't. It was, I ran into this guy who lives in the Midwest, and he organizes trips like this. And we met because I was invited to participate at this event in Alaska for the dog sledding, the Iditarod, is that even how you say it?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Where they had an ice cream festival, and I have an ice cream line, and he was a guest there. And this was at least 4 or 5 years ago, and I just got a call from him relatively recently to say, would you be interested in cooking at Versailles for a group of people that have organized this experience? So, but it is going to be difficult because there's no cooking in the palace itself. So the cooking has to be done in an off-site caterer and brought in hot boxes to warm it up
Wow.
and then served. So it's sort of cooking at the Palace of Versailles. So I hope...
Just like it was for Marie Antoinette.
Yeah.
So is it, like, there is a hotel there now, but this is actually in the...
Yeah.
This is actually in the
In
palace.
the kitchen.
Wow, that's incredible. So from the Iditarod in Alaska to
Yeah.
the Palace of Versailles, your work definitely takes you to some interesting places. Umbria, you mentioned you have
Yes.
a house there. Clearly, Italy has had quite an influence on you,
Yeah.
on your career. Tell us, like, how did you end up in Umbria, and what do you love about where you are?
So I'm near Perugia, which is the closest larger town, above Lake Trasimeno. It's pretty much halfway between Rome and Florence. So it's a great, not so popular, tourist-wise, it's not
Right.
that popular. So it's wonderful that it's a tiny medieval village, and I live about a minute outside the village in the country. So it's like the perfect location. But 24 years ago, looking for a place to bring my family for a month's vacation. I had few years into my restaurant Campanile with my ex-husband then, and finally we had enough staff that we could actually take a real vacation. So we were looking for a place to go with friends of ours that had kids of similar age to my youngest kid, because that's, Oliver, who was 5 at the time. Anyway, we thought about the south of France and kind of looked at the prices, and it was out of our price range. And then thought, well, I once had rented a place in Tuscany, and that was lovely and a lot cheaper. And yes, certainly it was. And then my friend who we were traveling with found this little town in Umbria where they were renting houses, or they call them apartments because they make up the walls of the city, for a lot less. And so we went there, and it was just the perfect vacation for a 5-year-old. You think, okay, where does a 5-year-old want to go? Do they want to go to Disney World, or can you take them to Italy?
Right.
And Italy just worked out great. And so I went back the next year and the following year, and then that following year, the 4th year, I bought a place there, and so I've had it for 20-something years.
Yep.
And I love having a base there.
Yeah.
I love having my things there. I love having my kitchen there. I love cooking there. And really, when I go there, I feel like I'm home. I don't feel like when I land at LAX that I'm home. When I drive up to my house, I'm at my house. When the plane drops in Rome, in my heart, I feel like I'm home.
When you walk into the village, like, what are you getting to eat in a place like that?
Well, the village itself, this little town, has a choice of 3 restaurants and 2 bar cafes, which is a lot for a tiny village, but I don't always eat there. One thing is I don't cook at home. I don't have kids that live with me anymore, and so there I really do cook. Mm-hmm. But besides that, are you familiar with the word putz?
Yes.
And I don't mean a person's
Right,
a
right,
putz.
right.
I
Putz
mean
around.
putzing. And
Yeah.
I do nothing.
Yeah.
I move a dish from this area to this area. I look up at the wall and I think, I really need a new picture there. And before I know it, it's like dinner time. I just putz around all day. And you know what? What a luxury.
That must feel really good. But actually, you made a point earlier about how you hadn't really had the time. You were starting Campanile. As a young chef opening restaurants and you don't get to travel unless
No.
it's for work.
Right.
And so, now you do. Now you get to putz around in your house in Umbria, and that must feel great. But what did that feel like out of the gates when you finally are getting to take this vacation? You love to travel. You love to travel, but you really haven't been traveling. And here you are taking your family to Umbria.
Well, I'll tell you what I did as soon as I bought that house. I carved out that month in the summer, and then I extended it to 2 weeks at Christmas. So that's a definite, and that 1 month is kind of morphed into 7 weeks in the summer and 2 weeks at Christmas. But I still, just because of who I am, I still need that sort of the umbrella of it's a work trip.
Right.
I don't just travel for pleasure. It's still there's too much guilt in there. It's really
Yeah,
hard
yeah.
for me to say to my staff, goodbye, I'll see you later, I'm off to Paris, or, see you later, I'm off to Argentina. I don't, but I go to all these places, and many places around the United States, because there's always a work component. So
Sure.
going to London I'm going to oversee my restaurant in London. This work trip going on to Spain I'm being hosted by one of our importers. Chef's Warehouse is taking us around to look at some products. And then Versailles is because it's work. I am cooking dinner for,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm guilt-free when I say goodbye to my staff and say I'm off to work. Just like when I go to Saudi Arabia to see our restaurant in Riyadh, or I go to Singapore to see our restaurant in Singapore, right? Same thing.
Of these, many places that you are going for work, what's one recently that's just surprised you and like from a food perspective where maybe you weren't Singapore? I'm guessing you're going in expecting quite a bit from the food, but maybe there's another destination, Saudi Arabia, for instance, which we don't know a lot about.
Right.
Food from that region, growing up here. So has there been a place like that that's just you've discovered really interesting food culture?
Last year, I discovered Marseille, which is a fantastic city. I mean, not only is it beautiful and diverse, but the food, fantastic. And I felt that way also with Mexico City. I hadn't been there for a bit. Mexico City, the food is just explosive.
Are we going to see a Nancy Silverton restaurant there?
Oh, I would
someday
love it.
soon? Yeah.
I would love to have a restaurant in Mexico City.
Yeah. No, Marseille, I like that example. I actually saw something on TV recently about Marseille, the food there, and just how different that can be than other parts of what you're expecting of French cuisine elsewhere.
Yes, because it's an immigrant city, and wow, do you taste that in the food.
Again, clearly Italy, all these other destinations have had an influence on you, but have there been any, did you come up with the idea for mozzo on while you were putzing around in Umbria, or what, how has travel
100%.
directly affected what you do?
Mozza is short for mozzarella. So
I did not know that.
See,
so, well, there we go.
there you go. So the concept or the focus of the osteria, and there wasn't going to be a pizzeria, by the way. It was just the nature or the landscape of the building that we leased had a pizzeria attached to it. And that's how that pizzeria came to be. But when I was in Rome, I was tipped off by Jeremiah Tower, one of the legendary California cooks from Northern California, after serving him a lunch that was focused on mozzarella at my house on my patio. And this was years ago. I mean, mozza's been around for 18 years and takes a year or two to put a restaurant together. So 20 years ago, probably, I was feeding him lunch on my patio and feeding him a lunch that was centered around mozzarella that I had just bought from the Casafficcia where they made the mozzarella, and I did all these condiments that went along with it. And
This is in Umbria?
Yeah, on my patio,
Yeah.
and he said, "My goodness,
I like the
you
scene.
need,
I love it."
you need to go on your way back to Rome, to L.A." because he knew I always spent the night in Rome on my way back. There's a new place that opened up. It's called Obica, and it's a mozzarella bar. And I never heard of something like that. I went and saw it, and I'm like, okay. And I was looking for a new concept for a new restaurant. It's like, all right, I'm opening up a tiny restaurant with a bar. I'm going to be behind it. I'm going to make all kinds of things using mozzarella. And that tiny little restaurant turned into a much larger restaurant where I wasn't the only one working there. But when you walk into the osteria, that's the first thing that you see is this giant marble bar doing dishes using mozzarella.
Mm-hmm. Obica actually ended up coming to the U.S. too, didn't
yes.
it?
And then then something happened with the partnership.
Okay.
And
'Cause I
there's
remember when it
Obica
opened.
with Obika, and then there's Obica with Obica, and one of them opened in Century City. And there was a
Yes.
few branches
I
in
remember
New
that,
York.
yep. Exactly. You mentioned Wolfgang Puck.
Yes.
You go way back. With
1982.
We've had him on the show, 1982. So you started as,
His
that was one of
pastry
your
chef.
First, that was one of your first jobs.
My
right?
first
How did
job.
that come about?
My first job in Los Angeles was in 1979 at Michael's Restaurant in Santa Monica, And Michael's Restaurant this Sunday is celebrating its 45th year.
And by the way, it's still really good.
It's still really
I love
good.
it. I go there for a happy hour.
He's
like they've got great. It's great. I love
still
that place.
there.
Yeah.
45 years
Absolutely
later,
an LA
which is like
institution.
unheard of. I don't know what it is in what a restaurant like a dog. What's a dog's life? 7 years, they say. I don't know what a restaurant life, but it's double that, I'm sure. So this restaurant must be 200 years old in restaurant life, I'll tell you, because to survive that. But I was there in 1979, 6 months after it opened, and I was there for about a year and a half, and then I went over and became the pastry chef, or the opening pastry chef for Wolfgang at this
Spago, the
unknown
original
restaurant, Spago. And who would have imagined that Spago became what Spago is today, or then?
Well, I think you brought up about Michael's and Spago. I mean, those two restaurants have stayed completely relevant and great for all this time, and in a place that, like you said, most restaurants are gone after a few years. And it's incredible that those were your two. I mean, how did that? It must have had an influence on you that you were starting in these places that were laying this foundation that we didn't know then, but that was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, both of those were incredible restaurants, and both of them had kitchens that provided a wonderful workplace, and I think that had a lot to do with their longevity.
Okay, pastry chef, that's your background. Tell us about the peanut butter cookie that changed your life. I need to hear about this.
Okay.
And give us a background on why I asked that question.
Okay,
too.
so that's my new book, and it's called The Peanut Butter Cookie That Changed My Life. And the reason it changed my life was sort of twofold. That in 2020 and 21 and 22, when everybody was baking their way through sourdough bread, and for obvious reasons, I didn't have that urge to do that.
Done that, yeah.
Discovered a peanut butter cookie that was better than any peanut butter cookie that I had made myself, and that enraged me because although I pretend not to be competitive, I'm incredibly competitive, and the idea that not only someone that used to work for me made a great cookie, but the idea that it was better than I made. And so I was determined to make a version that was better. Now, I say better because that's really in quotes. Her cookie is great, my cookie is great, but that's the only way I can describe how it changed my life. But it got me back into baking, but it also got me back into writing another cookbook, which I thought I would never write another one. It's my 11th cookbook, After I made that cookie, I thought, in the world of Google, where you don't even have to buy cookbooks anymore, you just Google what you want to make, and 1,000 versions come up, which is in one sense, I guess, great. But on the other sense, it's like, well, where do I start? Google chocolate chip cookie, and you get 20,000 versions. It's like, well, which one should I make? So I thought the kind of book that I would like to own was that between the covers, every recipe you really want to make. So whether it's pineapple upside down cake or angel food cake or a peanut butter cookie or a blueberry muffin, if you agree with my taste, then I'm going to offer you the best version of all those classics. But I had the time then, it was still a time when restaurants were not fully open. We had just a couple people in the pastry department. So all the cards were in the right place, meaning I had all the time in the world and all the space in the world to really focus in on every single one of these recipes. I have to say that I did a good job of them, that if you make them and you follow the recipe, because there's a lot of people that'll say, oh, it didn't come out. And I'll say, well, did you measure the ingredients? No, I just threw them together. Well, okay, it didn't come out. But if you follow the recipe, I think when you taste it, you will say, for the most part, you know what? That is the best version of that I've had.
That thing. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it. So I like, you brought up a point about, yes, you can search for recipes, but the book serves another purpose. And as someone who kind of has come out of the travel magazine industry, it's a very similar thing. Like if you're looking for something, the internet's great. Like I want to make peanut butter chocolate chip cookies, right? Boom. I'm going to get it. You don't know what's good and what's not when you're looking at these recipes. But a book like that, like a print magazine, in my opinion, is inspiration. It's telling you the things you didn't know you wanted to
Yep.
do, right? And that
Yep.
I think there is a real value in that still. And so I'm glad to hear that was kind of your impetus for that. And it really is like, to me, cookbooks 100% serve a purpose, because it's like, yeah, again, I'm going to flip through it and discover something
Yep.
that I had no idea I wanted to make. We talked about the peanut butter cookie that changed your life, but have you had a meal in the last year that's just kind of, this is why we do it, this is like, this changes my perspective on what this can be?
When I was in Mexico City last time, there's a restaurant called Martinez, and there were 2 salads on the menu. One is on our menu right now, and I make no bones about saying, when people say that salad was so fantastic, it's like, wasn't my idea, because I didn't do anything
So
to
you
change
got it from Martinez in Mexico City.
And what it is, it's a little gem lettuce salad where the little leaves are, first of all, stacked on top of each other, kind of in a line. But the leaves are first tossed in a green goddess dressing, which is an avocado-based kind of dressing. It has anchovy in there. It's very bright. There's a lot of acid in there. And all it is, and then there's lots of fresh herbs that go into the green goddess dressing, but the whole version of the herbs as well. But the clincher is these pumpkin seeds that I cannot find anywhere except for in Mexico. I brought back 20 pounds with me because I was just at my restaurant in Costa Palmas a few weeks ago, and I'm almost out of them. They're a very long pumpkin seed that, when toasted, they just sort of pop up. They're very tender, as opposed to the flatter, a little bit tougher pumpkin seeds that we're used to. But with those pumpkin seeds, they are tossed in a very, very light caramel. So there's just a hint of sweetness to it. And as simple and as possibly unimaginative as it sounds, it's truly an extraordinary salad.
That sounds incredible. Okay, so the gem salad with the green goddess and the only in Mexico pumpkin seeds.
Yes.
I know you traveled with your parents when you were younger, and you mentioned you kind of have tried to instill that in your kids too, and make travel fun and easy for them. How have they evolved? Like, what do they like to do as travelers now?
Well, one thing is, and I'm talking about my grandchildren, because my kids are great travelers, but I've traveled with my 2 grandchildren, and I know I'm very conscious of not stressing out and making the process fun for them, so that they too have great memories of travel. But I've been able to include them on some of my work travels. So in January, I did a pop-up in Anguilla. So I brought them along, and so here they're staying in this fancy resort that neither their parents or myself would have footed the bill.
Right.
They've been to Costa Palmas, which they absolutely adored. I've brought them to Hawaii. I am opening a restaurant, by the way, on Lanai, the island of Lanai.
Oh, wow,
but I
at the
haven't
Four
brought
Seasons.
them to Lanai yet. But other islands where I've had to work. So it's great to have them. I do a lot of work with Ojai Valley Inn. And so to them, that's their second home. It's, an hour away from them. They come up, they drive the golf carts around, or passengers in the golf carts. They stay at a great villa there. And Ojai, to them, they just know their way around and they run everywhere. But I have brought them to Italy a few times, and that's to stay in the village. My home is not big enough, but they stay in the village in Panicale, and we just try to have a whole lot of fun.
Do they know they have the coolest grandma in the world doing all that?
Oh, no.
So they have no idea. Okay. Well, with that, Nancy, thank you so much for joining us. It's been so fun talking to you.
Fun talking to you as well.
Well, thank you. It's great to have you.
And now for the Wallen wrap-up.
Hearing Nancy talk about her home in Umbria definitely made me want to go back to Italy. Who doesn't want to go to Italy? And of course, the summer season is upon us. A lot of people will be going there. I'm kind of hesitant to go this summer because I feel like there's going to be a lot of people there, especially with like the Olympics are in Paris. And so you're going to have a lot of people avoiding Paris for that reason and going elsewhere in Europe. So to be quite honest, it's now I'm recording this on June 6th. And I still don't have my summer travel plans figured out. I do think it's going to be Europe somewhere. Thinking north, but not sure yet. We might do kind of the loop between Vienna, Budapest, and Prague, which I've never done that. I've never been to any of those cities before, which is kind of like, places that I really, really want to go. Again, is summer, the height of summer when the Olympics are happening in Paris, the right time to do that? I don't know. So where are you going this summer? Where should I go? I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. I hope to figure it out in the next couple of weeks. So leave us a comment on YouTube telling us where you're going this summer, where you think I should go this summer, or on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, or send me an email, bruce@curtco.com. That's bruce@curtco.com. And let us know what you're excited about for your summer travel plans. Travel That Matters is produced and edited for Curtco Media by AJ Mosley. Marketing by Katrin Skapertis. For more information on the destinations we talked about today, please check out our show notes or visit curtco.com/travel that matters. We would love to hear from you, so please leave us a comment on YouTube, or if you're listening on the podcast, please write to us at bruce@curtco.com. That's bruce@curtco.com.